Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow the rules and get some pretty funny results. Now, I haven't been on this sub for a while, so I'm really keen to get into this first post by user/Bane Williams. To set the scene, I had minor surgery in the morning. Kidney stones aren't fun, and decided that it would probably be best to Uber to an appointment instead of drive. For most of the Uber drive, everything goes relatively peacefully. We're about 2 minutes out, and everything has been going as expected. What I wasn't expecting was for some rolled up stress head in a 4-wheel drive to have an insecure masculinity meltdown. Traffic is a little backed up, and my Uber driver does a socially frowned upon but not illegal maneuver. As we're stopped to let turning traffic have unrestricted access to a side road, not something we have to do as it's not an actual intersection, Uber driver notices that the guy in the right lane has done the same because the gap in front of him is too small for his giant 4-wheel drive. She indicates, takes the opening, and is immediately honked at by the 4-wheel drive. And OP has kindly attached a diagram, so let's have a look. And yeah, maybe if I was the driver of the SUV, I'd be unhappy, but I see where the Uber driver's coming from. She looks confused at me and asks if she did anything wrong. I shook my head. We're approaching the lights that cause the backup, and our emotionally stunted 4-wheel drive owner speeds violently into the light's right turning lane, screaming at us through his car, giving us the finger, the works. I laugh, the Uber driver ignores. As we continue up to the lights, going straight on, 4-wheel drive owner slams his 4-wheel drive into the straight lane with no warning or indication and slams his brake on. It's worth noting that this was done at a well-surveyed set of lights. He's in front of us and brake checks us again as we cross over the lights, and then he turns off onto the next side street. The side street I was going to get my Uber driver to drop me off on. I get her to go one street further up and U-turn so as not to antagonize the clearly angry driver and give him time to get ahead. She agrees, does the U-turn, then gets onto the side street. Only guess what's at the entrance to the street? The 4-wheel drive. My eyes roll into the back of my head as I realize there's a pretty solid likelihood the dude is going to come over and try and abuse us. The Uber driver drops me off and asks nervously, "Do you want me to hang around?" But I shake my head. I get my phone out and hit the record just in case. And sure enough, as my first steps down into the street happen, Mr. I purchase large cars to make up for deficiencies elsewhere is coming over. He's Greek or Lebanese, I can tell right away. The clothes, the annoyed strut, the glasses, the skin tone. Sure enough, he starts right away being verbally aggressive, and his accent confirms my suspicions. For 8 minutes, I let him go, complaining all about her driving. But when I bring up his own illegal actions, he says, "So what?" He tells me he doesn't care if I'm recording, does the short man syndrome thing of entering my personal space and calling me tough because I'm big, and tells me how hard he is for doing 4 years in prison, and then makes a fatal mistake. He tells me to call the cops. So I do. He's standing there riled up, a mixture of nervous and self-righteous energy. Except I tell the police immediately that I arrived at the location via an Uber and was being harassed. When I mention the word Uber, his head tilts. And when I explained his actions, as well as him admitting to them on camera, he looks surprised, and then concerned, and then he runs to his car, but not before I can relay to the operator his license plate. Police arrive later, and I show them the video footage of the altercation. I didn't think anything serious would happen. Most likely just a fine, unless he'd done this kind of thing before. Turned out he'd done worse. He'd been involved in a non-fatal hit and run where the police were only able to get a description of a vehicle and the driver. He was sentenced just last week. 6 months. Not much, as this was his first offense. At least, now when he tells folks he spent time in prison, he won't actually be lying. And a bonus! OP attached some of the audio from the argument. I won't play it because YouTube can be a bit funny about playing other people's work, but as usual, the stories are in the comments down below. Because this is the first story, just hit the first link, scroll down to the bottom of the story, and you'll be able to listen to a real entitled person in action. And here's our next post by user/sockfacekiller. I have a sweet snowblower, and I love to help out my neighbours by doing the whole block. I'm that guy. After a moderate snow a few years ago, 6 inches, my neighbour told me that he's very sensitive to noise and not to snowblow in front of his house. So later, that same winter, we got 17 inches. I got every house on the block, front and back, except for his. Even better, he was out of town, so weather warmed up slightly for an afternoon, then dropped again, so his 17 inches of snow became a wall-to-wall glacier. I live in Wisconsin. This is how we entertain ourselves in the winter. And you see, I'm no expert, but I feel like snow is a lot easier to clear than ice. This guy might have to pull out his crafting table, make a pickaxe, and spend a few hours whacking away. And here's our next post by user/RobinHuggle. My uncle's neighbours really hate him for literally no reason. And one day, he walked into his garden to find 3 plastic bags. The heavy-duty ones you get dog food and cattle feed in, lying on his lawn. And he knew immediately where they were from, since he only has one neighbour, and the bags looked as if they'd been lazily thrown over the shared fence. 2 of the bags were filled with leaf litter, and the other was full of apples that looked like they had been slightly eaten by worms. Obviously, the neighbours didn't want to eat them. My uncle, let's call him Flea, does all sorts of gardening in his spare time, and he thought that the neighbours threw him their waste stuff for him to use. So he went round to their house and asked if they were the ones who threw him the leaf litter and the apples. They shut the door in his face without answering. And it was at this point that Flea realised they did it maliciously because they couldn't be bothered to take their waste anywhere. Most of you probably realise that leaf litter is great for keeping soil healthy, and my uncle realises this too, and decides to make compost from the leaves to use for his onions. He grows large onions for an annual competition, don't ask. After he has a bag full of his homemade leaf litter fertilizer, he waits until one of the neighbours leaves for work, then goes out into his front garden and makes a big deal of spreading the fertilizer in front of the neighbour, exaggerating every slight movement and noise. With the apples, however, he decided to make, in combination with his own apples, some sort of beer, wine, cider hybrid. And he also made sure that at least one of the neighbours saw him using their apples throughout the process. The drink was pretty good in the end, if not a bit strong. The icing on the cake for me, though, is when he neatly folded up the plastic bags and left them piled in the neighbour's garden with a rock on top of them, in which he etched the word more. And Uncle Flea, you are an awesome guy. I think I aspire to be like you. And here's our next post by user/CheesyLllama. To clarify, both my parents are doctors in hospitals in small rural parts of my country. Yes, hospitals. One is normal, the other is a psychiatric one. Because of that, they are the only specialists in their respective domains in the radius of about 80 kilometers. So if they want some free time, they need to specify it long before, like 2 to 3 months even for a day off. Basically, we were planning our next vacations a year before, so the hospital can get subs in time. Now, we did as always. In September, they had specified when they want their 2 free weeks. Hotels were chosen and paid, etc, etc. Almost a year later, not even a week before my dad came like a zombie home, the hospital HR told him they didn't find a sub. So because of this special case, which is not special according to a friend who's a lawyer, he had to stay at work for 1 more week and join us later. We were completely bummed because of that, but we weren't going to be outdone by it. My dad brought the entire code of the hospital home, and we looked everywhere to find something that would let us take our dad with us. Nothing, until my mother started laughing at the table and she showed us something. She found out about a certain clause under which when the special case line was used, the worker was treated, and most importantly, paid as the sub. That basically means that you can dictate your pay as long as it's in the fork for such specialists. That means 700 to 1500 euros for a day of work. Double that if you're on call, then double that if it happens to be a Sunday. That's why subs were never allowed to be on call. Cue the malicious compliance. My dad took every possible on-call duty for the entire week which he was forced to work. The numbers stacked fast, since one of these days was a Sunday on-call. My dad said that he was never more delighted when he knocked on the director's door to tell him how much he was owed. They completely forgot about that rule, and the director could only stamp and sign approved, all while making the gaping fish face. It came to almost 30,000 euros for a week's worth of work. And this is what happens when you try to cut costs. They didn't want to hire out a sub, they didn't want to bother with the trouble, so they just cut their employees' vacation. And guess how much it ended up costing them? 30 grand. And here's our next post by user/XIII Stitches. My dad has been working for the same company for about 30 plus years now. My dad is extremely smart. I don't say that lightly. When he was 3 years old, yes, 3 years old, he rewired my grandmother's toaster oven when it broke. He graduated high school early and has always excelled in mathematics, physics, and most tech-related areas. My dad began working for Company X after finishing his associate's degree. He was taking some time off before going back to school as he and my mum had just got married and he needed money. So my dad began working in Company X's printing press room as he didn't have the academic credentials to apply for the job he really wanted at the time. This company printed everything from books to magazines, newspapers, and the like. According to my dad, he actually really enjoyed working in the press room. It was a lot of manual labor and he was stuck on second shift, but he really liked his co-workers and he enjoyed learning about the machines they used, as well as how to run and repair them. My dad has a great work ethic. He always works hard, as did most of his co-workers. Apparently, the management at the time were all kind of trashy. My dad had been working at this job for several months when he got the flu. He was informed by a co-worker that while they were able to call out sick, it would count against them when it was time for reviews. It was clearly an unfair and ridiculous rule. So my dad came into work the next day with a fever and nausea. He carried around a trash can with him for most of the day. It was a long and brutal shift, and he was thrilled to finally leave. By the time he had left though, everyone on second shift had been exposed to the flu, as well as everyone coming in for third shift. The company ended up having to shut down the printing press for almost a whole week, because nearly every press room worker was sick with the flu. While I'm not sure my dad had planned such a glorious outcome, he was very smug telling me this story, and said he would do it again. My dad went back to school and finished his degree and got a job much higher in the company, and now has quite a few people working beneath him. He never gives his employees a hard time about taking sick days. And the comments have some awesome stories that I'll like to share with you. I had an older boss straight up call me a liar over the phone when I told her I was sick, and said I better come in or there would be consequences, even though I also said I'd still come in if I felt better in the morning. I was 18, it was my first job, and I didn't know how to respond to that. My dad was next to me and overheard her. He grabbed the phone from me and yelled at her that I wasn't coming in, and if she tried to fire me for that, he'd take legal action. We went to the clinic the next day, and the doctor wrote me a note for multiple days off just to spite her. That's why you become friends with your doctor. My dad had to take a week off for back pain caused by an injury at work, planning on going mostly paperwork. Unfortunately, his manager's boss caught wind of this and tried to mark it as unpaid leave. Well, my dad stubbornly went to the doctor's office and got assessed. The doctor gave him 2 months off. It was a bad injury with no work whatsoever. Then got a further month light duties. And this is one I personally don't understand. Sometimes people get sick, and if you make them come to work, it normally means other people will get sick. Though apparently not everyone seems to understand that. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this little video as much as I did, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for Reddit videos every second day. But with that said, that is it from me. I hope you all enjoyed, and all I want to do is see you all here next time. See you later, guys.